All right. Well, hello, seventh grade. I hope you are all doing really, really well on your second day of e-learning. And we are going to take a few notes together, and then I will set you up on a little reading assignment because a lot of this is going to be review because in every single region of Africa, we've talked about some form of European country wanting to come in and take over and add them to their empire. And remember, that word is known as, wait for it, imperialism. And so, because a lot of these areas overlap, our notes are not going to be super duper long because you'll already know some of these things that we'll be talking about. The locations will just be different. And so, part of your assignment for e-learning today will go into that. But to start off with ancient Nubia, we are looking at, remember, northeastern Africa. Look, I can draw on my screen, which was right below Egypt. And the Nubians were actually in the Bible, as noted in different parts of the Old Testament where we talk about locations. Nubia is south of Egypt. And Nubia and Egypt together interacted with one another because of the Nile. And remember, the Nile is super duper long, and so it goes through northern Africa, but also into eastern Africa, where we're talking about now. But there was also a group of people at the same moment in time that were known as the Kush, who they take power. They're trading with Egypt as well. Mainly, we see them trading copper and gold and ivory and ebony, slaves, cattle, a lot of mineral resources, a lot of material resources, but also human beings, as well as animals. So we're seeing a lot of wealth, but we're also seeing a lot of ways to be able to make more money by not having to pay people to work for us, and then also animals that are going to help us save our work or save us from doing extra work and make things a lot speedier. And when things are speedier, you save more money, and therefore you make more money. But the Kushites, they adopt a lot of the Egyptian customs because they live nearby. So like we talked about with the Egyptians building pyramids after some of their pharaohs have died, the Kushites will do that as well. So there are parts of like Eastern Africa where you will see different kinds of pyramids. And so just for your viewing pleasure, look at me, I'm drawing a pyramid. It doesn't look very well, and I know you're probably all laughing at me at my drawing abilities, but that's the best I can do for right now. And we'll make another one, because the pyramids of Giza, right? There were 3 of them. I'll just go over into the words. Absolutely. But all things must come to an end, just like my drawing skills. And so in 350 CE or AD, they're going to be conquered by Axum. So kind of like when we were in West Africa, right? And we talked about our 3 empires, which were Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. This is what's going to be happening over on the eastern side of Africa as well, right? One kingdom is going to be captured and conquered by another. So we're going to clear all those drawings. We don't need to see those as we keep going. So let's see, what is next? And so here we are with Axum. So if we're looking at a map, right, so we have Egypt here. Ooh, and we can still continue to draw, right? So Egypt is right here. So that means, and I'll just put an N to stand for Nubia. So Nubia is like right around here. From Axum, when they take over, they come into this area, and along with that, just is a horrible arrow. Yeah, but they go in and they invade that area. But they had been around for a lot longer before they invade up where Nubia is, because they have been around since 1000 BCE, and that's even an uncertain thing. We don't actually know when they started. But the way that they're going to make their money, they're going to make all of their power is through trade, as do most countries and civilizations that we've talked about. So you have traders who are specializing in sea routes to India, which is just right over that way. Can I redeem myself with a different arrow? Not really, but it's fine. And so they specialize at going at sea, which makes sense because we're also on the coast. We're trading gold, ivory, any sort of raw materials, whether that's like wood or rocks, glue, believe it or not, and even candy. So delicious. Um, but we are trading mainly with Asia. And so at the height of Axum's power, it was the most important trade center in Africa, which means it would be even rivaling Timbuktu. But when we talked about Timbuktu with Western Africa, Timbuktu was around a lot later than 1000 BC. So most likely Axum was a lot more popular, a lot more powerful, more in the BC time period rather than when we would know Timbuktu with Mali to be famous. But the kings in the area of Axum eventually adopt Christianity as their religion. And so this country that we will know it to be today from your map, it would be actually Ethiopia. And Ethiopia still today is known as a Christian nation. And so there's that history of that from an uncertain but ideally 1000 BC time period. I hope you're really enjoying my drawings because I'm enjoying marking all of this up for you and not doing a very good job at it either. So, continuing on from Axum, we get to trade cities. And so we've started off in BC, now we're back in CE, which we would also call AD. But Arabs are settling on the coast, which means they're also bringing Islam with them. But for the Axum region, at least Christianity is staying there. But you're going to see languages like Arabic and Bantu coming together to create the language that is Swahili, which would mean, from our last unit, what word is describing two languages that come together and blend so nicely to become their own language, which all of you in your heads are like screaming, "It's a Creole language, Miss Bostic, it's a Creole language." And I said, yes, correct. Swahili is a Creole language. It's spoken mainly in Tanzania and Kenya. So if you've ever watched the movie The Lion King, which you should definitely watch while you're not at school, take a little bit of time as like an extra homework assignment because I'm sure you would love to do that. But this is fun extra homework, going and watching The Lion King, because a lot of the language that they use in that movie, um, for language purposes outside of English for you to be able to understand, is Swahili, whether that is the names of certain characters, like Rafiki. So his name is Swahili and it means friend. But you see that in The Lion King and in popular movies. But it's spoken in Tanzania, spoken in Kenya. But city-states will also emerge. So kind of bigger than a city, but not as big enough to be like a state. And these places will be like Mogadishu, Lamu, Malindi, and Mombasa. And they are going to be also pivotal places for trade. And off to the side, I have this map for you that kind of shows what resources are coming from where, which you looked at and kind of reviewed yesterday with your physical geography questions that I had you answer. But just to reference kind of what is coming from where. And it does a really good job of telling you what is what. But in Kilwa, which was an island just off the coast, you'd find copper and iron and ivory and gold. But it was also a walled city. And so people had to um, wait their turn to get in, basically. It was also walled for this idea of protection, right? So people can't come in and out without someone being very controlling of who is coming in and out, because you don't know who is your enemy and who is your friend. But also walls were really important to protect against some kind of attack if you had a lot of enemies or if you were very, very wealthy. And Kilwa was a really wealthy place in Eastern Africa. It was the wealthiest trade center at the time in East Africa around 900 AD. So post this idea that our other trade city, remember, and I'm going to flip back for you really quick. Remember our other trade city, which was Axum, the kingdom of Axum being really, really popular. But now we're coming back and we're seeing Kilwa being really, really popular and very wealthy. And they were ruled by Abu al-Mawahib or Mawahib. I know you also have missed my wonderful pronunciations of words, whose name means the father of gifts. And so wouldn't that make so much sense for your ruler of the wealthiest trade center in East Africa to his name literally meaning the father of gifts, and having all of this wealth and all of these resources that you are trading with other countries. And that can also remind you of Mansa Musa in Mali, who, when he made his pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia and crosses Africa, remember, he was like Oprah giving out salt and gold and salt and gold, and you get some salt, and you get some salt, and you get some gold, and you get some gold. And so Abu al-Mawahib is like the Mansa Musa of Eastern Africa. But after this time period, we move past the time of Axum and past the time of Kilwa, and all these little countries kind of start to form and create. And this is also the time that all of our Europeans are looking at Africa and they're like, we want all of their goods. We want all their resources. And remember, they meet in Germany and they take a map of Africa and they just split it all up. And they give each other different pieces of land and they don't think about who is living where. And Portugal was one of our first countries to come over to Africa. And they just start building all these ports along the coasts. And you can kind of see, even in this map, how there are all of these little cities that these lines are, this red line is coming to and they're stopping at. And those are going to be ports, places where you're going to go that'll be key for everyone to get to be able to trade with one another. But Portugal is going to try to bring Christianity back as the main religion, which will be really hard in most of Africa because Islam became so prominent because of trade. A lot of the Arab traders were Islamic, and as they were trading like physical things, we've also talked about how you can also trade language, you can trade ideas because of just the way that you live your life, the things that you say, the way that you talk, and that's how religious beliefs get spread as well. And so for the Portuguese to come in and try to bring Christianity back is going to be a really big deal. However, the Portuguese are not going to be looked at too kindly by the Africans because they're trying to come in and take over their land. They're going to be forced out by a lot of African groups. But European nations, like we said, and we called it the scramble for Africa, when we take the map and we split it up, the European nations will turn Africa into multiple colonies. And it's purely for the reason of being able to make all of that money. Here it goes. Money, 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 money. And so because of that, you'll see rebellions happen. People are not going to like this idea that we are going to be fighting each other. And one of those main places is going to be the country of Sudan. And their leader, Muhammad Ahmad, who is also meaning the Redeemer of Islam. He will lead them against the British. Their revolt will succeed in 1898 when the British reassert their rule, and the Sudanese people will fight back and they will win their freedom. And even more recently in history with Sudan, you've seen the splitting of Sudan. So we don't just have one Sudan, we have Sudan and South Sudan. And that was a lot of fighting over the religion. And so the south side of Sudan, so South Sudan, that country, they split off because they wanted to worship Jesus and they wanted to become a Christian country. But the rest of Sudan, because of the Arab traders, they were Islamic. And so it was a really big political and religious split. And so taking that and knowing that, and hopefully you've taken notes, hopefully you've written down some of this, pause me when you needed to be able to write things down. And I also attached on this assignment, I attached your fill in the blank notes, so hopefully you were following along there. But taking this and this idea that we're going to have some of these pieces in Africa who are going to fight back against the Europeans, one of those places is going to be Ethiopia. And so Ethiopia will fight back, and their emperor will be a really big part in that. And so if I get out of this, so close down, I also attach this document, and so it's called Menelik II of Ethiopia on Imperialism. So you're going to read this little short piece about imperialism, which, remember, we've talked about imperialism before, this idea of European countries going and adding other pieces of land to their empire, just like Star Wars, where we get imperial from. You'll read this and then you'll answer these questions, and only really answer in like 1 to 2 sentences, really no more than that, and then submit it up onto your assignment page on Teams, and that you will be good to go. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. And also thank you to those of you yesterday who posted on Flipgrid with our trivia questions. Remember, if all of you post on there, I will give you extra bonus trivia points. And we all know that we would love for that to happen. So that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day and that you will be the champion of e-learning this fine Tuesday. All right, see y'all later. Bye.